website works now. And so the first sort of third or 25% of the course is sort of on slower time scales. And it's sort of explaining those beautiful colors you see of the Midwest ISO. The price is going to $500 and then down to minus $100. And that's from an auction that occurs every 5 minutes. And what they're doing is reallocating resources every 5 minutes. So there's ISO is the independent systems operator. We'll hear a lot about that. And they're sitting there and making decisions about which generator should be on and so forth. And there's auctions involved as well. And they have a function which they want to optimize. There's a demand for power, and they have lots of choices in which bids to take in this auction, and they want to minimize their costs, subject to a constraint the supply equals demand. So, so the first maybe a quarter of the course will be first about how do you solve these optimization problems, and I'm developing the theory of optimization so I can at the same time prove deliver the economics that's behind all of this. And this will be a comedic part of the course, because when you actually see the economics that justifies these markets, you'll just laugh your heads off. I mean, it really is. It's a scandal if you ask me. It really is. It's just crazy. I don't know what they were thinking, but they didn't let any engineers in the room. So when they designed these markets, they were economists who knew a lot about economics and knew about commodity trading, and they ended up having a lot of, and also there were people in operations research. And in operations research, people are trained in sort of basic economics, but not much more. So they were involved as well. The history is very strange. So it led to this very strange system we have today, which I want to try to explain why it's led to very little innovation in power. Well, in other areas like telecommunications, innovation's amazing. I mean, just every second there's new ideas. So that's a battle I've been fighting for, I don't know, since early 2000. And I'm starting to make headway. So I'm starting to convince these ISOs that they're on the wrong track. So anyway, so basically we need to understand optimization. I passed out that survey to see what you all know, and I found you all know nothing. So under optimization, almost all of you said nothing. Under control, nothing. I thought that was put as a prerequisite. It was supposed to be. That's a clerical error. It's a clerical error. You're supposed to, I mean, we don't really need much. I'll tell you what you need to know. And some of you know something about power, but so most of you know nothing about anything. So, but optimization, Jesus, I mean, you did take advanced calculus, so you must have seen something. I mean, you were supposed to have seen something. All right, so today basically, I mean, I don't know how much I'll cover, but ideally I'll cover all of optimization in 45 minutes. Let's get started. So remember, S is some subset of Euclidean space. An example I gave you, n is the number of generators. I've got n generators that I want to decide which ones or which levels. So the basic problem is I want to minimize overall x and s, f of x, and we'll give that a name. So that funny letter there is an eta in Greek. And a star means that it's optimal. Star is good. All right? We want to solve this problem. Now, you know what happens when O is an open set, or in S is an open set, or S is Rn. It's unconstrained. Well, let's just take R1. So one dimension. You've all seen this, right? You're trying to find the minimum. So is that the minimum? No, it's not achievable. Is that the minimum? No. And you basically take horizontal lines and you ask, does it intersect? And you move that upper line up and up and up until it intersects. And the fact that that's a horizontal line is why you get that the slope is 0. And that's denoted x star as the optimizer. All right, so so you can see what's suggested here as well, that if the function's differentiable, then the derivative must be 0. Now, I use a gradient notation here because this is not just true in one dimension, it's true in any dimension. Okay, all right. So the gradient is the vector of partial derivatives, right? All right. All right, so that's the basic stuff you learn. And the gaps there are a couple of gaps. I mean, one, so there's a big deal made in the book of the case where that function f is piecewise linear, and this boils down to a linear program, and a lot of your intuition boils away. Yep.
The first one is that?
Gaps. Sorry, this is gaps. So when you this point of view leaves that out, you can see what happens. This intuition of bringing up the horizontal line till it meets still holds. And so you can generalize this a bit. But there's also some structural constraints we want to take advantage. And really what I mean by that, and what I'll be talking about, is just inequality constraints with some of the functions. So we're going to be given for 2. Well, what I'm going to mean by that is I'm going to redefine this. I'll be giving some other functions. So I've got m functions, g1 through gm, all on the set S. And I'm going to write g as the vector function. All right. And I'm going to want to refine this problem. And that'll be my new definition. Now, I don't know. I mean, often we don't have inequality constraints in these problems. We have equality constraints, like supply equals demand. But equality constraints can be changed into inequality constraints. I mean, if I had supply, as an example, supply equals demand, or generation equals demand. All right. So D is demand given, G is generation. I can write that as G minus D is less than or equal to 0, and D minus G is less than or equal to 0. So I can convert an equality constraint into inequality constraints. So this is as general as I ever care to be. And if there's a constant on the right-hand side, I can bring it over. So it's pretty general. So I mean, you could always say, well, I could always redefine S, but I want to use the structure of the functions. That's really going to be important. To be able to use structure of the functions involved. And in particular, all of economics, competitive equilibrium theory, this notion of efficiency, it's all about this equality constraint. That supply equals demand. That's supply, that's demand. That's what we're going to see. All of the popular economics that people love, the invisible hand, is about very carefully looking at that constraint. That's what we're going to see. All right, so what do you learn in calculus? you do something very similar to this line that comes up. So, I mean, you should have heard this in calculus before. Maybe not, I don't know. Okay, so let's have the case m equals 1. So I just have one function for constraints. And n equals 2 means I get to draw on the blackboard. Okay, now let's just say, let's give it a different name, maybe x circle. This would be the optimizer with and s equals Rn, R2. I don't have to worry about s. Okay. All right. So in general, s could be another constraint like that the entries of x are non-negative, something boring like that. Now, this I'm just writing down is the optimizer without the constraints from G. All right? All right. And but we've got this thing we have to worry about, this set that G is less than or equal to 0. And what you do is you draw that set. All right, so we have a blob here, which is our constraint set, and we got unlucky. So the optimizer, the unconstrained optimizer, is not feasible. It's not in this set. All right? So we use some geometry. So remember when I raised the line, instead of raising a line, I create balls around x naught, and they're sub-level sets of f. So let's draw one. Okay, so I draw some blob around x naught, and it's a set of all x such that f of x is less than or equal to t, where t was like the level that I had before. So as I increase t, I'm letting f get larger and larger and larger. All right? Now what can you tell me about t? So let's give this a name. Let's call this eta star star. You know, this is the super optimum that I can't achieve. How is t related to f eta double star? Based on my picture, I just want to make sure you're all awake. There's a relationship between t, yeah. You had the right gesture. It's larger, you know. I mean, the fact, or maybe it's equal. It might be the function's really flat, you know? But it's t is greater than or equal to eta star star. But what about eta star? How is t related to eta star? Somebody else, based on that picture. So over here, I'm looking at every point in this blob, and I'm looking at f of x every time, and I'm taking the minimum over all x in that blob. And s, I ignore that. I'm just taking s to be all of R2. So how is t and eta star related? What?
Eta star greater?
Eta star must be strictly greater, exactly. And let's give this a name. This particular t, let's call it t naught. This is a special T naught. I mean, I chose a T naught so that it'd be intermediate, you know. Right? So you go through this and you grow and grow and grow. You increase T. When you make T larger, you get a bigger set, you know. And you do that and do that and do that. It's, you know, you find that we have this inequality because because these two sets are separate, you know. And we grow and grow and grow. We increase T until they just meet. You know, let's call it RT star, and we'll think about what T star means. So T star is when they just meet, and there's an intersection right there. And that's the optimum. You know?
Optimum because it's minimum in which value?
Right there. Because right here, I have a set of x, so which at fx is less than or equal to t, you know. So those are all the possible x's for which fx is less than or equal to t naught, say. Well, it didn't intersect my constraint set, so t naught is too small. It can't be achieved. You know? And I keep doing that, and as I increase t, if it doesn't intersect, it's not feasible. I have to make t larger. And the first t for which they meet, that's the smallest, you know, the smallest possible t, which is intersection, you know, that point must be optimal, must have the lowest cost. You know, it's because if I make it any bigger, that's RT with it bigger. That's taking f to take on larger values. Who cares about that? We're trying to find the minimum. So that's x star. And I really wish I'd colored chalk here. All right. All right, so why is this in a Calculus 3 course? Let me remind you something. What's that vector? And what's this vector here? And what's this vector here? So go back in your brains and think about when you took calculus. What? I think I heard it. It's a normal to that level set. But what's the normal to a level set called in calculus? What? Well, no, but there's a special name in calculus. Yeah, remember? What? So when you take Calc 2 and they draw these vectors, what are they referring to? Gradient. So this is a level set. So the outside here is where g equals 0. And the gradient is the direction of maximum increase. You know? So if you just call this, you know, some g bullet, this vector is the gradient of g at the point x bullet. All right. Now the same thing here. That is a gradient of f at some value. I don't know, whatever that value is. I don't want to have to keep on coming up with definitions. Yeah.
About this, is eta star included in RT naught?
Eta star is a number.
Yeah, the n star.
So remember, eta star is by definition the minimum of f of x subject to g of x is less than or equal to 0. And here we've taken s to be R2. So
like, shouldn't the sign be f of x greater than or equal to t0 for RT0?
no, I mean, take a look. So if I make t naught really small, I get a tiny little ball, and it's not feasible. That little ball doesn't meet my thing, so it's not feasible.
F of x is greater than or equal to t0.
No. Remember, eta star is with the constraint. So with eta star, I have to minimize subject to this constraint. This guy here is an absolute minimize without any constraints. So the value here is maybe much lower than eta star. So that's what I'm calling eta star star. Okay? All right. So basically, if everything's nice and smooth, these two butt against each other beautifully, and the normals are in opposite directions. So you saw that was the gradient of G. That was the gradient of F. And there you have it. All right, so you have this really nice geometry that the normals point in opposite directions. So you should have seen this. You know, I mean, if they didn't teach you this in calculus, then your prof should be executed. I mean, it's so, you know, it's so important, you know. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a theorem, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'm gonna make notes with all the details, and but I should say one important thing. One thing you need for m greater than 2, greater than 1. So here m was 1, just one constraint. You need something called regularity. All right, regulate of any x. I'll explain what this means. Of interest, I mean, I'm looking at a vector x, I'm saying, is it optimal? You know, somebody's told you it's optimal or something like that, and you want to test. And by regularity, it means just this. If you look at the vectors, grad g1 of x, and I'll call it bullet. I'll put a bullet there to make it special. So those are m vectors in Rn. All right. X is a vector in Rn, so you take the gradient. You pile up these partial derivatives in a column vector. These have to be linearly independent. So in general, you need this assumption that these are linearly independent. Often it comes for free. Like in a case where these are linear, you just need, you know, it's just trivial. They'll of course be linearly independent. So, but under that condition, you have some really nice results. So, I will put in sort of a theorem. I better get my notes. Well, I don't need it. All right, so first of all, I need these gradients to exist. I also need them to be continuous. So these gradients, the partial derivatives are all continuous. And suppose an optimizer exists. And oh yeah, I don't want to have to deal, let's stick to this. Again, I'm going to leave this out for now. So just forget about S. We're only looking at constraints from these functions. So we have an optimum, you know, wherever it went. Well, then this is true. But in this more general case, it goes as follows. So then there's a lambda, a vector lambda. I put the plus in the bottom to say its entries are non-negative. such that that holds. Oops. Okay. So it's a little, basically if m equals 1, I've got lambda is positive. So it says that the gradient, that this guy is equal to a constant times this guy, where the constant here is negative, because it's minus lambda. So here, the fact that I've got this plus this equals 0, really just says that grad f is the negative of a linear combination of the grad g's. All right. So so you have a linear combination in m dimensions instead of just one, and the geometry is the same really. I mean, it's hard to draw a picture, but that's it. I mean, the reason it gets messy is that these constraints have corners. Okay, so a typical case that you look at is where these guys are affine. Okay, so it's linear plus a constant, and if you look at one, function, g1 of x less than or equal to 0 is a half space, but then you have all of these. You go through and you have, g2 of x less than or equal to 0 and so forth, and you take all these constraints and you end up getting a set like this. When you say that it has to be true for every, for one function you get a half space, but we have an and here. We're saying that we have gi of x is less than or equal to 0 for every I. So when you say for all I, you're taking intersections, right? So you get a polyhedron. And so when I do my trick and I grow this ball around that r sub t that I had before, to go back and look at my r sub t star, very often it's going to hit one of these corners, and then I can't argue that G is smooth. It's got a big corner right there, But you've still got these gradients sticking out. In this particular case, it's really easy. The gradient of g1 of x, it's just v1. All right? And so it's those, when you hit a corner, it's those points that matter for which the lambdas are non-zero. I've got a gradient pointing that way, a gradient pointing that way, I take a linear combination to go inside. Okay, so that's great. Just as before, I have my grad f of x star, and that's x star. But I have to take a linear combination of that vector and that vector to point inwards. All right? So that's 2 weeks of a convex optimization course. I'm not going to give you a proof of that, but that's, that's the main geometry. All right? And you're going to have to just memorize that theorem. We're going to be using that, every week for the next few weeks. So before I give, I only have 20 minutes, but before I give an example, any questions? Most of you are still awake, that's good. Okay, but just memorize it. I've got that the gradient of f is a linear combination of the gradients of the constraint functions. All right. Now, yeah.
Is lambda just like a multiplier?
Oh yeah, I forgot to say it. Yeah. Lambda's called the Lagrange multiplier. I forgot to say that. Okay, and often, in fact, we should put a star there. Go back and put a star in your lambdas, because this is a very special lambda. All right, I don't know. I'm going to go a little bit further. So again, this is something that, at least for m equals 1, this is something you should have seen before. Okay, so where you get some really nice geometry and insight is by looking at something called a relaxation. And this is something that none of you would have seen before, because usually this is taught in an advanced course. But the ideas are really simple, and there's something everyone should know. I don't know why it's not taught as well. The reason for going this is we want to get more insight, we want to interpret lambda, and we want to get rid of this obsession with differentiability. The book, it's really hard to go through and develop ideas for linear programming, develop ideas for smooth functions, and everything looks the same, and you don't even know why. And it turns out there's one umbrella that takes care of linear programming and convex optimization, and it's basically this, all right? And it's a really cute idea. So, and convex duality, all of that. The dual of a linear program is a very special case of convex duality. Okay. And again, you'd have to take another course to get the details, but I'll give you the main flavors that we'll be using. So there's a wonderful trick here. So first of all, there's a Lagrangian that most of you should have seen before. Oops. All right, so you create a function of two variables now. X is in Rn and lambda is in Rn. And you make this lovely realization that if x is feasible, and what I mean by that is g of x is non-positive. And again, g is a vector, but I mean this component-wise. So g1 of x is less than or equal to 0, g2, g3. Now, I forgot the positive sign. The reason the lambda is non-negative here is that I'm just taking a linear combination of the g's, and each one of them has non-positive entries. So same is true for the linear combination. So I'm going to write it down. How would you compare these two guys? Here I've got Lagrangian, and here I have f of x. How are they related for a feasible x? Again, g of x is a vector with all entries that are either 0 or negative. Lambda is a vector with all entries 0 or positive. What happens when you take the dot product? Well, this is, yeah, I mean, it'll be less than because it'll be negative. So, or less than or equal to, okay? Because I'm adding on a negative number. All right? So when I minimize this over all x, and now all x, then that's going to give me a lower bound. So that's the motivation for this, something called the dual functional. And it has a lot of nice properties. For one, for each x, this is a linear function of lambda, right? Or affine, if you like. For any fixed x, this is an affine function of lambda. And I'm taking the minimum of all of them. It improves some nice properties of phi star. So even if f was a horrible, discontinuous, miserable function, it turns out the minimum of linear functions is really nice. It turns out it's always concave. Okay, something to know. The minimum of linear functions is always concave. The maximum of linear functions is always convex. It's another definition, basically. It's the same thing. A function's convex just means it's a max of linear functions. It's another way of seeing it. And I'll draw a picture for you in a second. So that's one nice thing. Two, it's the minimum of all x, and so it's less than or equal to if I put in more constraints. Right? If I subject this to more and more constraints, I make the minimum larger. All right. If s is huge, then maybe this is minus infinity. I don't know. So I've got the dual functional is less than the minimum I get, where I respect the constraints. I threw them away up here. But we just said that that's less than or equal to this. And that's what I called eta star. Okay? So the minimum of f subject to s is an s, and g of x is less than or equal to 0. All right? So the first thing is that we convert a problem that might have been very ugly to a problem that's concave. I mean, I've got a new function that's concave. So one of the goals of this is to create a nicer function to work with. This is concavity is a nice property, just like convexity. They're both the same thing. I mean, and we have an upper bound. So that motivates the dual function. All right, I've got an upper bound for every possible lambda, and so the dual is just to try to see if I can reach that upper bound. So I'll draw a picture here. So again, lambda will be a Lagrange multiplier. Now, so lambda is an Rm, so if m equals 1, we can sketch this. So even if x is an R 10 trillion, you know, x is a really high dimensional problem, the dual is going to be one dimensional. And concavity means it's a sad face. So convexity is a happy face, it's a bowl. Concavity is a sad face. And I should warn you, it might be that when you perform this minimization, you get minus infinity. It might be that, you know, that can happen. So that's still concave. It's still. And I've got an upper bound. So what I've told you is that there's an upper bound, and phi star of lambda is less than this upper bound for any possible lambda. All right. So the maximizing the lambda star is the maximizer of this thing, and it gets the closest possible eta star, but it might not achieve it. And in general, that's called a duality gap. And I should have written it the other way. That's always less than or equal to 0. I just showed you that. Yeah. And if I flip this around, it'd be not. Well, let me just flip it around. That's positive. So that's called the duality gap. But obviously, the duality gap is usually 0 under the assumptions in this course. Okay. And what assumptions are those? Yeah. What can you guess? Based on the title of this part of the talk. Convexity. You know, basically, if you have convexity, everything is beautiful. So under very, very, very general conditions, under convexity, there is no duality gap. You know, so it's and so I don't have time to give you a full theorem, but maybe I'll finish up next time with that. But it's usually it's 0. I put that in quotation marks because what I mean when I say usually, I mean the problems we'll look at in this course, it'll be 0 because we're looking at nice functions. The generators, their cost we'll assume is convex, and we'll have equality constraints, and we'll have nice problems. So we don't have that. But So I'm going to have to finish up. I don't even think I have time for an example, but the main thing is that we don't have to learn about linear programs. So I said read the appendix of the book. Don't bother reading the appendix on linear programs. That's the dual of an LP. And it's all you do is you just write down the Lagrangian and perform this minimization, this maximization. That's the dual. And there's all sorts of interpretations of lambda we'll have to do next time in terms of sensitivity, in terms of prices. So lambda will become a price in the economic setting. But again, we're out of time. So next time I'll do that. Next time I'll give an example, and I'll get a little closer to applications that we'll be encountering. And these notes will be online soon. They're probably 24 hours. But you don't need this for the homework. The homework, you just need the definition of a convex set. So, okay, until then.